Our Soul Matters theme for the month of April is awakening. We continue our exploration today, gaining wisdom for our journey from the insights of priestly prophets, from the words of social visionaries, and from our own experience. Let us explore with joy and open hearts. I imagine that discussion of Earth Day and of the eighth principle might seem strange bedfellows to some of us. When I returned to the topic after having said it a month ago, I did ask myself, what was I thinking? What do climate crisis and the eighth principle have in common? Well, it turns out a lot. Most generally, both point to the same moral problems that our 7 principles seek to address. Both call us to our responsibility as a faith community. Both call us to insist that this faith community and all of us who compose it address honestly and compassionately a wounded world that demands our action. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, we are called beyond awakening into action. We must make an actual vow to hear the cries of the world, to step into the experience of awakening to the suffering of the world and the desire to bring an end to that suffering. May we guide our hearts in service to a greater good that holds all living things in its holy embrace. So let us dig into this call. What vows have you made or still might make to bring action to a woeful world? Many of us know the principles, or some of them, those value statements that the Unitarian Universalist Association and its congregations affirm and promote, but let's review them. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Now, part of the beauty of these statements lies in how you can combine 2 or more of them to highlight the interconnectedness of the others. I myself am particularly partial, and do it a lot, to pairing the first and the 7th, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. This combination brings together the microcosm of every person, every life, with the macrocosm of the web of existence, the universe. This combination reminds me that as we imagine into existence a better world, we must imagine always in both of those layers. Individually, within our hearts, we must perceive the possibilities of transformation within and move ourselves into responsibility for working toward the transformation of our whole selves. We must ask ourselves, are we living in ways that honor our own profound human worth and importance? Are we examining ourselves for the views that might hold us back from relaying our whole human goodness to the world? Are we holding ourselves to responsibility to live well and with dignity as the beautiful beings that we each are? And at the same time, we must ask ourselves, are we living in ways that respect the interdependent web, acknowledging that we are not simply individuals, but inextricably interconnected beings, responsible for working compassionately with others to ensure the liveliness of the whole that holds us all? Are we thinking critically and compassionately about ourselves so that the web flourishes with equity, justice, compassion, open-heartedness, and acceptance of others, shaping our actions and behaviors? Ours is a living tradition, not closed between the covers of any books. It's a tradition subject to and requiring transformation, just as each of us do. It is only since 1985 that these 7 principles were adopted by the Unitarian Universalist Association and its member congregations. Only since 1985. And in the last decade, individuals and religious communities have tasked themselves asking, do we, and to what extent do we, live up to these values? And in too many ways, we find that we just do not. And that's painful to acknowledge. Specifically, our siblings of color feel the effects of racism in our religious communities, unintended as those are. And in our society, of which we are a reflection, race continues to be used systematically to batter our siblings of color, to belittle their lives, to deny their human rights. In order to strengthen our resolve to uphold the dignity and worth of every single person and our beautiful and inevitable connectedness with each other, a new principle has been proposed, and it will be discussed at the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association in June of this year. The 8th principle asked us to acknowledge that perhaps the language of the 1st and the 7th principles has not been sufficient to hold us to account for the American sin of racism. I look at it this way. If those principles and the other 5, if they had been sufficient to root out racism in our systems of living, including in the ways we are a religious community, well, we wouldn't need to entertain an 8th principle. But we haven't rooted out racism, so we do need the 8th principle. And it calls us to uphold and promote journeying, right? Trying, moving toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. It calls us not just to thought, but to action. And I know we long for such a beloved community where the worth and dignity of all people truly are realized. While the 8th principle focuses specifically on racism, it highlights also the ways that some of us have not been considered fully a part of the whole, fully part of the whole web of all existence. If we have struggled at times to see that all human beings with different life experiences and different histories and different ways of being, if we have struggled to see all human beings, to see that they are all part of the whole web, surely we also continue to struggle with the reality that we, all of us human beings, are indeed part of the web, part of nature, and not apart from it. Earth Day was initiated as a student movement back in 1970 to draw attention to the climate and planetary changes already noticeable and damaging to the web of nature. And the movement needs to continue, doesn't it? Because we haven't really arrived at the solutions that are required. And it may be that the movement was and continues to be held back by the mindset that humans are somehow separate and above nature. As designer and humanist Bruce Mau says, for most of the history of Western culture, we have been told that we own nature, that we have domination over it, that it is limitless and ours to use up as we see fit. Today, science clearly shows that none of that is true, but still this old way of thinking, which puts humans at the center of the universe and against nature, it dominates our imagination. What we need is a new mindset, a shift, a new way of seeing who we are and where we are in the universe. We have thought of nature as a set of resources for us to use. In some ways, we imagine ourselves as conservators or managers of nature, using it in better ways, but still using it with mainly ourselves as the center. In order to counteract this way of thinking, Mao argues for a design mindset, which he describes this way. The moment that we have chosen to live with intention, to be deliberate about the outcomes of our way of life, we become designers. The way that we live is either random, accidental, or haphazard, or it's designed. Living fully into our seventh principle, living fully the promise of Earth Day, that requires, in Mao's words, understanding our lives as a continuous flow of energy and matter in a never-ending cycle. There is nothing and no being and no human being that is not part of that web of existence, of that ebb and flow of energy and matter. We are made of the same star stuff. How do we begin to imagine ourselves as partners and companions to the natural world, in harmony with the processes that literally sustain our very existence as living beings? Now, design itself is not an answer. Design is not a benign technology, any more than any technology is benign. The world has indeed been designed in ways that profit concentrated wealth and power. The domination of our economy by the interests of a small number of the hyper-rich means that we are dependent upon fossil fuels and industrial farms that pollute land, water, and earth, and pharmaceuticals that deaden us or are too expensive to actually help us. A democracy becomes an autocracy when political activity is increasingly directed towards silencing particular voices. Biodiversity, including human diversity, is increasingly destroyed if it gets in the way of the concentration of wealth and power. That's how the world has been designed. And even design that seems, on the surface of it, absolutely justifiably good, that has unintended negative consequences too. Vaccines for smallpox and other deadly diseases designed a world that led to overpopulation. Industrial farming techniques led to bumper crops of food to feed those masses of us, but also poisoned the natural world, including our own bodies. The language of the Declaration of Independence asserted the equality of human beings, but the language of the Constitution upholds property rights especially hideous as human beings were forced into the status of property. Design itself isn't the answer. Mao proposes that most of our problems result because we humans have placed ourselves at the center of design. And he proposes that it is life that should be at the center, all of life at the center. And he writes, when we put life at the center and understand our place in the cosmos alongside and connected with the rest of life, we come to honor and respect life with all other loving creatures, all other living creatures. We join life. We see our lives and everything that we produce and consume as part of the natural world and not separate from or above nature, but an expression of our natural being. As I understand this call to a design that puts life at the center, I find it entirely in keeping with the eighth principle, the principle that requires that we hold all humans as equally human. As such, race cannot be a bar to being part of the natural world. Experiencing the web in different ways does not mean we are not all on it. All human life is life, and as such, part of that larger life. What would it mean to design our society, our systems, our cultures with life rather than humans at the center? According to Mao, life-centered design is a culture of caring, first for ourselves as individual citizens, then for our communities, because we cannot have a thriving individual in a toxic community. And from there, we extend our caring to the environment, because we cannot have a thriving community in a toxic ecology. Design with thriving life at the center. That is design that includes all of our principles, including the proposed eighth principle. It is a design with the planet at the center, with humans as a conscious part of nature. Human life fully knowledgeable that and fully acting as if our own health and well-being were entirely interwoven and interconnected with the thriving of the planet, which, of course, it is. Design with thriving life at the center. That is design that includes all of our principles, including the proposed eighth principle. That is design with the planet at the center, with humans as a conscious part of nature, human life fully knowledgeable that, and fully acting as if our own health and well-being were entirely interwoven and interconnected with the thriving of the planet. In the words of Bruce Ma, let's make this life-centered understanding of our place in the cosmos and experience a new way of being. This is what we are called to do. We can change the world using our two hands, our minds and hearts, our privilege, our intelligence, our creativity, our labor. We can and we must. We can work by design to map a path for the future we desire with flourishing life, the way, the reason, and the goal. Nothing but ourselves can stop us. For we are wholly involved in each other, wholly involuted, part and particle of each other, conscious of our place in the cosmos. This is our unique human way to be the universe, to be part of the continuum of the all. We have capacity, we have effectivity, and though we might despair, though we might find ourselves too small, we are a magnitude when we live into our own worth and dignity, when we unite and work together for the good. Who are you working with? I know it's someone. What larger organization are you part of to help design the future that you desire, even if you're not going to live to see that future? I know you're part of something larger. What actions are you taking now that you can amplify, join with other actions, with the whole of life at the center? I know you are taking actions. Keep doing that. Keep doing what you're doing to put life at the center. Life is taking place in the in-between as well as in our lofty goals. The detours and the details craft the path and make it our own. We did not make this day, but that we have the glorious pleasure to meet each moment as it unfolds is what keeps us connected. Let the fire of commitment set our mind and soul ablaze. Let us open to the full dignity of every human being so that together we might heal the world and take our rightful place in it. May we be so moved as you remember today and every day that you are loved, you are worthy, you are welcome, and you are needed. May you feel it so. May it be so. And may we say together, Amen.